Hello everyone, bringing you an unboxing video today where we're going to be looking at some more Canadian kit which has arrived courtesy of a friend of mine over on Instagram, Graham the leather guy over on Instagram. He is not only a serving member of the Queen's Own Rifles, he worked with the Queen's Own Rifles Museum, and still does, and also produces excellent reproduction leather accoutrements. I don't have any myself, other than one small item he's made for me, which I believe is arriving in this lot. The leather shoulder pad I mentioned in a previous video for the submachine gun pouch for the Carl Gustaf submachine gun, the Swedish K. But he makes excellent photographs attest, and other people who've received some of his leather work have attested that it really is very, very good quality. So I would recommend going and having a look at his Instagram, which is linked down below in a pinned comment, should you be interested in any sort of Victorian era leather equipment and through into more modern leather kit as well. Really is some interesting bits and pieces on his there are some interesting bits and pieces to look at on his Instagram page, and there may be something that takes your fancy, worth having a look at, and possibly something I'll be availing myself of in the future. But in this video we're having a look at the bits and pieces that have arrived, which I believe are all Canadian Cold War era bits and pieces. So without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video and have a look at what has arrived. So get this opened up and I'll start pulling bits out to have a look at. Remove the packing paper off the top there. Right, so the first thing we have in here is something used alongside the Canadian 1964 pattern web equipment. Now this is Canada and Australia, I think New Zealand as well, all used a heavy barrel version of the self-loading rifle with a fully automatic capability as a support weapon. So these had straight 30-round magazines, and Canada introduced this carrier to allow the magazines for the Canadian, the C2, to be carried. So obviously a magazine in each of these, and it's not uncommon to see a C2 gunners with these, and then also with the 1951 pattern ammunition pouches, sometimes two of them, on their 1964 pattern webbing to carry the ammunition necessary to obviously provide a support using the heavy barrel version of the rifle. Obviously it had a bipod and so forth, so it was set up somewhat for providing fire support, but it did have the issues of being loaded from underneath, being a magazine fed weapon, and so forth, that didn't have a top feed like the Bren. So it had similar issues to the Browning automatic rifle, basically, when the two are compared. But that's what Canada went with. We have two straps here with the plastic hooks, similar to the oh, come here, it's just got twisted, there we go. This one's missing its clip, but nevertheless serves the purpose. You have two plastic hooks there. It has come unclipped. It'll probably be okay on the mannequin, but it won't be, probably not for actually walking around wearing this or carrying it as part of web equipment. But anyway, so you have those there. I might see if it's possible to source a replacement hook perhaps, and unpick this and replace the hook, but we'll see. It'll be fine on the mannequin anyway. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Graham, for that. Much appreciated. That'll be covered in more detail in a future video, of course. Something I mentioned in my recent video looking at the bush uniform is wanting a cap, and I had forgotten that Graham had mentioned, when I made that video, had mentioned a cap. This is the cap from that uniform. It's similar to the winter cap in shape and form to a degree, but obviously made in the green drill material. It does have a neck curtain which fastens up with press studs. I think the peak has seen better days. It's the stiffening in here is broken. You can actually see it poking out there from the break there, but nevertheless a nice thing to have. Not particularly common, I don't believe. See lots of ventilation eyelets in the back there, but this will be covered in more detail going forward as well. So that's the cap from the bush uniform. Again, thank you very much, Graham. A couple of woolen items in here. Oh, I see evidence of moth, so that is going to have to go into quarantine. So we've got what would probably in modern context best be described as a beanie, but I believe Canadians refer to this as a toque, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But basically it's a wool hat, as you can see. So that will go into quarantine briefly, by which I mean the freezer. And then we have another woolen here, a balaclava. Now, let's have a look in here. This should have, yeah, that's a nice clear label in there. So you can see It's actually referred to as a cap comforter, but you have X51, which was Canada's cold weather gear, which existed at the time of Korea. X51 was sort of experimental 1951 designation. There were Parkers and various things that came under the X51 designation as well. You've got the manufacturer there, Dorothea Knitting Mills Limited, Toronto, Canada, dated 1952. So a nice bit of Korean War era Canadian cold weather kit. That's probably going to go in the freezer as well, just on in case we've got evidence of mothing there, but that needs to go in the freezer as well, as it's been in with the toque. And we have push that a bit further on, Canadian wool shirt. Thank you very much for these once again, Graham. Again, probably put that in the freezer as well. Interesting part of the design, as you can see, we actually have these, let me show here, we've got these additional buttons which allow the collar to be buttoned down when it's open. So you see there's a buttonhole worked in there behind the button. When you wear it open, you actually button the collar down using that button. You also have a button on the sleeve and a flap inside, which means that once it's rolled up, you actually have a little button over flap to keep it rolled up. Quite innovative for the time, really. 1950s, I think. Is there a... There we go, the nice clear marking in the 1952 again, Canadian inspection mark there, as you can see. What's that? Monarch Overall Company Limited, I think. So that's a lovely thing. Again, that's probably one for quarantine briefly. Get that in the freezer and make sure it's moth free. Thank you very much indeed, Graham, once again. So we have a bag of Insignia here. The 25 Brigade badge, which was then used later on as a sort of a national identifier. You see Canadian forces, Canadian troops deployed on UN deployments wearing these as sort of a national identifier. And another Queen's Own rifle shoulder title. I have a pair which don't match very well, and I think this is going to be a better match for, well, I say a pair, obviously they aren't a pair because they don't match. I think this will match better with one of the ones I do have, so I'll have to swap that over. Thank you very much for that as well. Oh, and a later shoulder title from the combat uniform as well. These were worn on epaulets on the shoulders, as I've shown in previous videos. Obviously QOR, Queen's Own rifle, so that's nice as well. And then we have the Canadian parachutist qualification, if it will focus on that automatically. There we go. Now, I'm trying to remember the variation between the red and the silver maple leaf. And off the top of my head, I can't. But there is a difference in the colour of the leaf. And as I say, off the top of my head, you'll have to forgive me. I've forgotten what that denotes. But that's lovely as well. And then a full colour Canada shoulder title. I think these were worn early on in the very dark green service uniform, but happy to be corrected on that. It does seem to have a very dark green backing rather than black. That's very nice as well. And then we have, I'll let the focus here, subdued, oh, interesting, a CAD-PAT Canada title. Nice to add to the little collection of shoulder titles. There is a little pamphlet available on this style, well, the OD style of shoulder title that I may have to pick up at some point. And then we have a subdued flag, again, worn on combat uniform, I think late 80s into the 90s. I think it's changed from the colour flag to subdued in the 80s. And then a couple of cap badges. Infantry cap badge, which is rather nice with the enamelled finish there. Obviously infantry and infantry. Well, I'm not going to try pronouncing that with a French accent, but obviously bilingual. And then Queen's Own Rifles cap badge, which is lovely. That's really, really nice. Do not have one of those yet, so that's very nice to have. Thank you very much for all those, Graham. And there is more to come as well. Move this off to one side. We have a pair of combat boots. Now, see, I have a pair of Mark IIIs, and I know they have a different tread pattern to this, so I don't know if these are a slightly earlier pattern. Someone will have to advise me on that. I'll have to ask you, Graham, after the fact. But they're 10e, so they should be my size. Obviously the Greb company, quite well known. I think they manufacture boots and they manufacture care products as well for boots. But they're lovely, very solid condition, not a huge amount of wear to the tread. I mean, obviously right where the most wear is going to be done, right on the ball of the foot there is quite a bit of wear, but very much wearable. They're not worn out at all. So I think I now have 3 pairs of Canadian combat boots. I think, as I say, these may well be an earlier pattern to the Mark IIIs with that tread pattern on the sole. The Mark IIIs I have a tractor tire style tread to the rubber, similar to British combat boots, the Boots Combat High. I'm not sure if this is a slightly earlier thing, or whether it's just a manufacturing variation. I can't imagine that they just allowed to put whatever tread pattern on that they wanted, so I'm assuming it's a different mark of boot. As I say, I'll have to ask Graham. But thank you very much for those, Graham. Again, I think, let's have a look here. I think the rest is full of 1951 pattern. Oop, piece of cardboard taped around that. Not sure why, probably to protect the fittings and so forth. So we have I think this has a set of mess tins in it, does. So 1951 pattern mess tin pouch with another set of Canadian mess tins, which is great. They're very nice. Shape-wise, they're actually a good stand-in for British early war ones. So from a using point of view, though the hinge is a different shape, they don't look particularly, the hinge plate that is a different shape. They would almost act as a stand-in for that. So I've got 2 pairs now, and as these are quite clean, I might end up using these potentially. But they're a nice thing to have as well. Very, very clean mess tin pouch there. And the 2 ammunition pouches. This is all really nice. I think this is better condition than any of the other bits of 1951 pattern I have already. So the initial intention was that this would all be blackened, and there's one last thing to talk about on the bottom there, which I'll put to one side for a moment. We'll talk about that in a moment. Move the box out of the way. I've got the pack there. Oop. So we've talked about 1951 pattern in more detail previously, but there's nice clear stamps in these as well. And we have entrenching tool cover. Again, lovely condition. And various other bits and pieces in here. No haversack, but that's not a problem. I do think I have 2 haversacks already, if I remember correctly. But the pack there, as you can see. And then we have the belt, the 2 braces, and the brace attachments as well. So that's another haul of 1951 pattern. As I say, this stuff is actually, some of it is certainly better than the stuff I already have. I certainly have a webbing belt which has sort of been blancoed with some waxy finish on it. The idea initially was that this stuff will be blackened, but what I'm going to do is pick out the ratty bits from the amalgamation of 1951 pattern I have now. I don't think any of this stuff's going to get blackened because it's all in better condition than the stuff I already had. But the idea is to make a blackened set, or at least a sort of a battle order set of the equipment, because the Queen's Own Rifles did that. They blackened the equipment using boot polish. Very similar to what the Royal Tank Regiment did in the UK, and other units as well. The Royal Marines blackened their web equipment using boot polish. And just to show, this is stuff, just to show sort of how that comes out. You can see here I've been working on this for the stuff that arrived from Ian's very kind set of equipment stuff he sent over. This is the bits and pieces I purchased for the New Zealand military police setup. Indeed, the belt is appropriate for Australian as well, but New Zealanders seem to have carried a little bit more of the US leather equipment in terms of the whole set of pistol equipment. You can see the finish there on a green belt, how you get this shiny black polished finish on the webbing. So that will be, not this set, this is all far too nice for that. It's lovely unissued condition seemingly. all the stamps and everything are very clear as well. So I'll pick out the nastier bits, the bits that have got a bit more wear on them, or they've already had some form of coating put on them, and I will blacken those to make a basic set of 1951 pattern blackened, which should look quite smart. So there we are. That's everything that's arrived. Thank you very much indeed, Graham. I say majority of this was gifts, apart from the 1951 pattern. There's a last thing to look at here, which is Graham very kindly made me a leather piece to replace that which is missing on the Carl Gustaf ammunition pouch, obviously for Irish use. So I'll bring that in now and put that on, and then that'll be it for this video. So there we are. That rather nicely completes the shoulder strap of the Carl Gustaf ammunition pouch there. Just need a little bit of brown leather polish on this just to darken it down a little bit. Thank you very much indeed, Graham. As said at the start of the video, Graham makes all sorts of excellent leather reproductions of leather kit used by the British Army and the Canadian forces, and it's well worth a look on his Instagram account, say Graham the Leather Guy, which is linked down below in a pinned comment. If you're looking for some reproduction leather kit, I can highly recommend taking a look. It's something I plan to partake of in the future at some point when I have everything organised in the new house, which is coming along, and I can work out how much space I have, and the collection can expand again a bit going forward potentially. But yes, so there we are. Thank you very much indeed for this, Graham. Very kind of you for doing that, and thank you very much for putting all these bits and pieces together for me and shipping them over. Very much appreciated, as I said before. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at those bits and pieces which have arrived. Obviously these will be covered in more detail going forward and will form parts of future videos. That's the idea of all this. Thank you very much once again, Graham. Also, thank you for clarifying the combat boots are indeed Mark IIs, as I'd supposed they probably were. These are actually from a veteran of the Canadian Forces who served in the late 60s, early 70s. So they're an excellent addition to the collection, an earlier pair of combat boots pre-Mark III, which is certainly the most common ones to find. So it's fantastic to have a pair of Mark IIs in my size. Much as the uppers don't differ a great deal, having the different sole pattern and everything nicely shows a difference between the two. So that'll be coming up in a future video looking at Canadian combat boots. Anyway, that's everything for this video. I do hope you found it interesting, as I said before. If you have and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little notification button down below, and that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Patreon and PayPal are both linked down below, and as I always say, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. But that's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.